Hey folks, in my last video I touched on the topic of Bible chronology, and in it I showed a short clip of a spreadsheet that I had made several years ago showing my studies of the chronology of the Bible from start to finish, but of course I couldn't really show it very well in that video because it's just too big and too cumbersome to try to put into a small TikTok video. But somebody made this comment. A user named Charlie says, "Can you share the spreadsheet?" I don't know that there's really a good way that I can do that on TikTok. I might be able to create a PDF file or post it on a website in sections because it's so large. But as far as presenting on TikTok, that would be a little bit difficult. I'll try to put together, I guess, maybe a synopsis or different explanations of the sections of it, and maybe you can get an idea of what it contains that way. So let's try to do that. Now, I'm going to try to break this down into 10 sections, and the first section I'm going to deal with is the time from the creation of Adam and Eve until Noah and the flood. And it's probably one of the easiest sections to deal with because that genealogy is already listed in the Bible. And that can be found in Genesis chapter 5, where it lists the patriarchs all the way from Adam down to Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And it will list the ages of those patriarchs when their son, the next in line, is born, and it will list the amount of lifetime that they lived entirely from the time that their son is born until their death, and then give a summation of that total time. So we have all the numbers that we need to find out how much time has elapsed during this time period. But there is one caveat that I have to point out for this section. Do we go with the Masoretic text numbers for this time period, or do we go with the Septuagint numbers, which are significantly different? And you can find more information about this on the Wikipedia article, Genealogies of Genesis. And in that article, there's actually a very useful chart that breaks down these numbers from Genesis chapter 5 in a very easy-to-understand format. So, for example, here we have the patriarchs and the Masoretic accounts of their ages for certain events. And on that chart, it'll give such things as the number of years from creation to their birth, how old they were when they had their firstborn son, how many years took place after that to the time of their death, and so on and so forth. All of this, again, being taken from Genesis chapter 5. But, of course, that translation is different depending on what text you're dealing with. So, for example, these are the numbers for the Masoretic and the Vulgate version. Now, when we take a look at a text like the Samaritan Pentateuch, we notice that some of these ages or numbers began to be presented differently. So there is some variations depending on what text we are looking at. And when we look at the Septuagint version of this text, we notice again variations within the numbers. But in the Septuagint, the main difference between that and the Masoretic appears to be, at least on the majority of the numbers, simply adding 100 years to the age of the patriarch when he has his firstborn son. Now take notice of that pattern of practice, because that's going to become important later when we get into another section of our biblical chronology. But suffice to say, when we add up all these numbers, we get the following for these three different texts. From Adam to the flood in the Masoretic text, we get 1,656 years. In the Samaritan Pentateuch, 1,307 years. And in the Septuagint, 2,242 years. So which one is correct? Now, the King James and most of your modern Bibles are going to go with the Masoretic text, and I believe that that is, in fact, the correct choice. But the arguments for the different chronologies are complex and several, and it's too much for me to get into in this video. So, for now, I'll just say that I go with the Masoretic text. If you want to find out more about this topic, there's plenty of information out there, and I can even possibly do another video about it later on. So, turning back now to my chronology, I again have a start year for creation of 3967 BC. And if we use the Masoretic numbers for the chronology of this time period, then we simply add 1,656 years to bring us to the year of the flood, which on my chronology is 2,312 BC, as the year that the entire earth was covered in water. One important note here, I'm using 3967 BC as year 1, not year 0. And so, if you want to do the math properly, you probably should subtract from 3968 just because of the inclusive versus exclusive reckoning that I'm using here. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to do this series in 10 parts, but I'm going to break it up into separate videos because, well, this is just a lot of information to cover, and my videos are already getting pretty long each time I make them, so maybe it's easier just to make smaller videos over time. However, having said that, I don't have a lot of time, particularly this month, so I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to finish all of the videos covering the entirety of my chronology, but I'll do my best. Of course, there's also the other problem that TikTok may not be around here pretty soon. So if that's the case, I highly recommend you go to the link in my bio and join some of my other social media platforms because I may have to eventually upload all this there for you to see the rest of the series. So please do that before you do anything else because otherwise you may not get to see the end of this series that I'm going to make, and who knows when I get to finish it. So I hope you enjoyed part 1 and keep looking for part 2, which should come, I don't know, sometime pretty soon, hopefully. Okay, bye!